Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is our second installment in the Trust Crash series, and today we are wading into a metaphor that feels a little too real right now. Bubbles.
Not the fun kind either. We're not talking about champagne.
No, definitely not. And not even just the financial ones, though that's where we're going to start. We're talking about information bubbles.
Right. These systemic, sort of self-reinforcing structures that basically dictate what you see online, what you end up believing, and, ultimately what you trust.
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive is to get into the stack of sources you brought in. We've got systematic reviews of YouTube's algorithm. We've got case studies from Chile and Romania.
And some pretty deep analysis of political fact-checking out of Spain.
Right. And we're looking for the parallels. If a market bubble like the housing crisis is fueled by cheap credit and bad loans, what's fueling the information bubble?
Well, that's the analogy we really have to hang on to. The core of this is what we're calling information inflation.
Okay, break that down for me.
Think about it like a central bank. If a government decides to, just print money to solve a crisis, what happens?
The value of that money plummets. Hyperinflation. Each dollar, each peso becomes worthless.
Exactly. It approaches zero. And the digital equivalent, which our sources point to, is when these huge platforms print an infinite supply of unverified content.
So just an endless fire hose of stuff.
An endless fire hose. And this creates what one source calls a selective consumption of truth a la carte.
Truth buffet.
A truth buffet where everything is free and most of it is poison. And when you have that much noise, the value of actual, verified, objective reality, it also approaches zero.
Information, inflation. That is a terrifying way to put it. It suggests the problem isn't just that there are lies out there.
No.
It's that the currency itself, truth, is failing. The whole market is broken.
It's failing because the system is completely saturated. This overabundance, it's not a bug, it's a feature, and it contributes to the growth of disinformation. People just retreat to the truth that feels best to them.
And the danger is that truth becomes, functionally worthless. The noise is just too loud. The feedback loops are too strong. You can't tell what's a real investment in knowledge and what's just informational junk bonds.
Precisely.
So our mission today is to dive into how these digital systems, which are, let's be honest, designed for profit, end up becoming these high-speed rail lines directly to conspiracy and extremism.
Let's pull back the curtain. Let's look at the machine.
Perfect. Section 1. The algorithmic engine, the digital bubble machine. So if we want to understand a toxic asset bubble, we look at cheap credit. If we want to understand the information bubble, our sources say we have to start with the YouTube recommender system.
Yeah, this system specifically is the prime mover. It's the engine inflating these bubbles.
Yeah.
The first thing you have to grasp is just the sheer scale of it.
Okay.
According to the sources, the recommender system is responsible for 30% of all video views on YouTube.
30.
30%.
So wait, 1 out of every 3 videos you watch isn't really your choice. It's the machine's choice for you.
It's the machine's suggestion. It completely flips the script on media consumption. It's not active discovery anymore. For a huge chunk of the time, it's passive consumption guided by a system you can't see.
And just to be clear for everyone, that recommender system is the up next video, the stuff on the sidebar.
Right. It's all based on your search history, what
Yeah.
you've watched before, all the data they have on you. And its goal is simple: maximize your watch time.
Because more watch time means more ad revenue. But the sources say that maximizing watch time often means maximizing what? Emotional content, confirmatory content.
Exactly. And that leads us straight into the two big structural problems that the systematic review identified: the filter bubble and the rabbit hole.
Okay, let's start with the filter bubble.
The filter bubble is just informational homogeneity.
Mm-hmm.
The algorithm sees you like something and it just gives you more and more of that thing. It curates content that perfectly aligns with what you already believe.
So if you're into sustainable living, you get a beautiful, eco-friendly bubble.
Sure. But if you start showing a little interest in, say, sovereign citizen ideology, you get a very different and much more reinforcing bubble. It's great for engagement, but it's absolutely terrible for seeing any other point of view.
And the research here is pretty definitive, right?
Oh, yeah. The review covered 23 different studies on this, and 14 of them, a clear majority, explicitly pointed the finger at the YouTube recommender system for creating pathways to what they call problematic content.
That's a pretty damning consensus.
It is. They tracked how users descend into things like extremism, racism, incel ideology. The system isn't just accidentally showing you bad stuff. It is reliably guiding users towards it because that's what keeps them glued to the screen.
Okay, so let's unpack that descent, the rabbit hole, because this is where it gets, well, kind of terrifyingly specific. I'm thinking of the Alfano study.
Right, so what the researchers found was that the starting points for these descents were unbelievably innocuous. You could end up in some deep conspiratorial territory, not by searching for lizard people, but by starting with videos about martial arts.
Martial arts.
Martial arts, general fitness, or, and this is my favorite, tiny houses.
Tiny houses. How do you get from a cleverly designed loft bed to deep state conspiracies?
Well, you start watching a video about maximizing your living space. The algorithm notes an interest in, say, self-sufficiency, autonomy, maybe a slight distrust of, big systems like the housing market.
And the waiter starts getting ideas.
The waiter starts getting very aggressive. And maybe the most chilling part of the research was that some extremist pathways actually started from content designed to counter extremism.
Wait, what?
Yeah. One study found that users could land on extremist content within just 2 clicks of watching a counter-message video.
That's insane. It's like you're trying to look up the number for the fire department and your phone just routes you directly to an arsonist convention.
Because engagement is engagement. A high engagement, angry comment on a counter-extremism video is still high engagement. It all just feeds the beast.
This is the perfect setup for our aggressive waiter analogy. The algorithm isn't just a helpful menu. It's a salesperson pushing the highest margin items.
Right. So you, the user, walk into this quiet restaurant. YouTube, you're not looking for trouble.
No, I'm just here for a glass of water, please. I just searched for basic fitness routines. Very simple.
Ah, basic fitness. A lovely choice, sir. A classic. But may I say, you look like a man of discerning taste. Someone who understands that, the mainstream menu can be a little diluted.
I guess. I just want to do some push-ups.
Tonight we have a house special. It's off menu, of course. Very exclusive. It's called the Spicy Conspiracy Theory. And I think it would pair beautifully with your previous viewing history.
My viewing history.
It shows an interest in body autonomy, high-intensity interval training. It all points in one direction, sir. Your search for water was just the amuse-bouche. We saw you pause for a second on a video about supplements. That told us everything.
It did.
It told us you're ready for the main course. This is a 10-step journey we have planned for you, starting with that tiny house video you watched last week. And it culminates in definitive proof that shape-shifting alien reptiles run the global financial system.
Bye.
We can get you there in 5 clicks. You must try it.
And that's the thing. You're just trying to figure out your macros, and the algorithm is insisting that true enlightenment comes from believing your senator is secretly a lizard.
And this isn't just a funny analogy. The sources show this absurd journey has real horrifying consequences. They cite the case of Buckley Wolf.
Right. This was a really tragic story.
Yeah. He killed his brother because he was convinced his brother was one of these shape-shifting alien reptiles. And when they tracked his digital path, it started with martial arts and fitness.
Just like the study said.
The recommender system just walked him step by step toward alt-right content, then general conspiracies, and finally to this deeply paranoid, violent worldview.
The path from how to do a perfect squat to homicide based on intergalactic paranoia was paved by an algorithm whose only goal was more watch time. That is the cost of information inflation.
So let's get a bit more granular on the specific types of problematic content the review identified, beyond these big sensational cases.
Okay, let's start with anti-vaccine content.
Early studies showed a really clear, really strong pathway into anti-vax material. But the research also noted something interesting.
What's that?
Later studies suggested that YouTube actually started to push back. They made efforts to, prioritize authoritative sources or demonetize harmful misinformation. And it had mixed results.
So they can intervene if they want to.
They can. The algorithm started recommending more pro-vaccine videos over time. But the damage was already done for a lot of people. The market was already flooded with the bad information.
Right. And what about the broader category, pseudoscientific content?
Here, researchers found a subtle but really important difference. They found that users were more likely to find stuff like flat Earth videos or anti-mask theories from the search results page itself, not just the recommendations.
So if you search for, is the Earth flat, you're going to get flat Earth videos. Shocker.
Exactly. But the recommender system still plays a huge role in amplifying it once you click that first video.
It grabs the baton and runs with it.
It absolutely does. Simulations still showed really clear pathways to extreme and unscientific stuff, even when they started from reliable sources. One report, for instance, had researchers search for global warming.
Okay, a pretty standard important topic.
Right. They found that a shocking 16% of the top 100 recommended Up Next videos contained climate change misinformation.
16%. So almost 1 in 6 recommendations from the world's biggest video platform are actively undermining scientific consensus on a global crisis.
That's information inflation. The platform is actively introducing junk bonds into the economy of knowledge.
And the last one, which is really concerning, is the incel-related content.
Yeah. This is, a digital community based on involuntary celibacy that often spirals into extreme misogyny, racism, and alt-right radicalization.
And what did the research methodology show about how people get there?
So for this, they used a technique called random walk analysis.
Sounds vague.
It's a way of simulating a passive user's journey. It literally tracks where you'd end up if you just blindly clicked on whatever the platform recommended next over and over.
It's like letting the aggressive waiter just bring you course after course without you ever looking at the menu.
That's the perfect way to describe it. And what the random walk analysis found was an 18.8% probability.
So nearly 1 in 5.
Almost a 1 in 5 chance that a user would be shown at least one incel-related video within just 5 steps, 5 clicks, from a totally benign starting point.
1 in 5. That statistic should just stop everyone in their tracks. The architecture is explicitly and efficiently facilitating a route to extremism.
It rewards division because division is a hell of an engagement driver. And that brings us perfectly to our next section because the algorithm is just the plumbing. Now we have to talk about the people intentionally pumping poison into the system.
Right. Let's move to section 2. The disinformation pathology. The intentional lie. We're going from accidental algorithmic chaos to calculated strategic manipulation.
To really get the intentional lie, you have to understand its 3 key parts, as the Elcano Institute source defines them.
Okay.
First, there have to be a strategic intention, a plan. It's designed to produce a specific effect on a specific audience. It's not a mistake.
It's a weapon.
It's a weapon. Second, it has to have the appearance of truth.
Yeah.
It needs to look like a real news article, a real document, a real photo. And third, at its core, it is a lie.
And that strategic intention, that's really the dividing line, isn't it? It's what separates disinformation from just, misinformation.
Exactly. Misinformation is your aunt sharing a fake cure for cancer on Facebook because she genuinely thinks it's helpful. Disinformation is a foreign state actor creating that fake cure to undermine trust in the public health system during an election.
So we can joke about the flat earthers or the lizard people.
And those are definitely a rupture in, scientific consensus. They're functionally worthless beliefs.
But they don't usually have a geopolitical goal to destabilize a country.
Precisely. They're noise.
No.
They're not the weaponized content we're about to get into.
Okay, so let's see where this intentional lie hits the real world. The sources give us this incredible case study from the Chilean constitutional plebiscites in 2022 and 2023.
Right. So researchers there looked at 237 confirmed cases of disinformation that were debunked by local fact-checkers. Gives us a really detailed map of how these campaigns work during a huge high-stakes vote.
And the first thing that jumps out is where this stuff was spreading.
Yep. A huge majority, 85.2%, circulated on social media.
So it's not TV, it's not radio, it's the platforms.
It's where the bubbles are. The intentionality is focused where the algorithms are most effective and the audience is most segmented. Traditional media played a role, but a much, much smaller one.
And what about the source? Who's making this stuff?
Well, that's the tricky part, and it's by design. The vast majority, 84%, came from what they call a diffuse source.
Meaning you can't trace it back to a single person or group.
Exactly. It's an intentional fog of war. It gives them plausible deniability. But the other chunk, about 15%, was clearly traced back to public figures or institutions.
So you have this untraceable grassroots-seeming stuff, and then you have political figures amplifying it.
It's a pincer movement. And the fact that 84% is untraceable means they're just relying on the network, on the algorithm, to do the work for them. It's like informational offshore banking. The money moves, but you can't see who owns the account.
And what form did this disinformation take? Was it all like complex, deep fake videos?
Not at all. That stuff is expensive and time-consuming. They used low-cost, high-impact formats. Almost 40% was just images, memes, manipulated photos, quote, graphics, and another 31% was just text.
Because that's what goes viral. It's fast, it's cheap, it's emotional.
And it's perfectly optimized for the algorithm. The main types were what they called misleading content, so taking a real fact and twisting it, And imposter content, like putting a fake logo from a Ministry of Health on a false claim.
And this kind of strategic campaign,
Yeah.
it's obviously not limited to one country. The sources give us a really sobering example from the 2024 European elections, specifically in Romania.
Yeah, this is a textbook case of what the sources call Ingencia's external interference, a massive coordinated campaign designed to serve foreign interests. In this case, it was attributed to Russia.
And the result was staggering. The unexpected win of a far-right candidate, which was then thrown out by the courts because of massive manipulation.
It's a direct measurement of a successful disinformation campaign's impact. And this is a sophisticated operation. They created a flood of suspicious accounts on TikTok and Telegram, because that's where the young voters are.
They knew their audience.
They spent over €1 million paying influencers to spread their narratives. And they used advanced tech to get around bot detectors. This wasn't just a few trolls in a basement. This was a state-level information warfare campaign.
So what was the narrative? What was the lie they were selling?
It was pure, primal fear. The central false story was that if the pro-Western government stayed in power, young Romanians would be drafted and forced to go fight in Ukraine.
Wow. Simple, terrifying, and almost impossible to disprove in the moment.
Exactly. The only way to save yourself, to save your children, was to vote for the anti-NATO, pro-Russian candidate.
And they didn't stop there, did they? They also went after existing social divisions.
Oh, yeah. They pushed stories blaming Ukrainian refugees for crime waves, for collapsing public services, all things designed to feed social unrest and turn public debate into just this pit of emotional confrontation.
So let's tie these two sections together. The disinformation isn't just about the lie itself. It's about how the lie exploits the architecture we talked about in Section 1.
It's a geostrategic tool. And its whole purpose is to exploit the fragility of consensus that the filter bubbles create and amplify.
The goal isn't just to make you believe one fake thing. It's to destroy your trust in everything.
Everything. Democratic institutions, the press, and even fundamental things like scientific knowledge.
Right.
If you can undermine consensus on climate change or on a vaccine during a pandemic, you've done more than just spread a lie. You've created a permanent state of information chaos. The goal is to make people believe that nothing is verifiable.
And in a market where nothing is verifiable, any narrative, any lie can suddenly seem very valuable.
And that leads us directly to the people trying to clean up this mess. The regulators trying to impose some order on this broken market. The fact-checkers.
Okay, Section 3. The fact-checker response chasing the bubbles. So if disinformation campaigns are flooding the market with toxic assets, then fact-checkers are supposed to be our regulatory agency.
They're the crucial defense mechanism. And this whole field of fact-checking journalism is relatively new. It really only got started around the year 2000, with groups like factcheck.org in 2003.
So it's basically a 21st century invention to deal with a 21st century problem.
Pretty much. And they tried to create a framework for it. The International Fact-Checking Network, the IFCN, was set up in 2015 to lay down the rules: impartiality, transparency, accountability.
But how does a small group of journalists even begin to tackle this, especially when, as we saw in Chile, 84% of the lies are from untraceable sources? You can't check everything.
You can't, so you have to triage. The Chilean platforms, Malaspina-Check and FactCheck-CL, they prioritize two main things: viralization and public relevance.
So they go after the biggest lies that are spreading the fastest.
Exactly. You have to focus your resources where the potential for harm is greatest.
So what are their weapons in this fight? What are the tools they're using?
Well, it's a lot of digital forensics. The sources show their two biggest tools were reviewing official documents, going back to the public record, which they used about 39% of the time.
Okay, the anchor to reality.
Right. And the other big one was reverse image searches, which they used in about 38% of cases.
So that's like the informational equivalent of checking the serial number on a counterfeit bill?
That's a perfect analogy. When almost 40% of the disinformation is a manipulated photo or an out-of-context image, being able to trace that image back to its origin is the fundamental way you debunk it.
But even between the two Chilean groups, there were some differences in their approach, right?
Yeah, and it shows that even within the industry, there are different philosophies. FastCheck really prioritized finding the original source of the lie. Malaspina, on the other hand, leaned much more heavily on consulting external experts in whatever field the lie was about.
Both seem like valid approaches.
They're both rigorous, but it shows that the process has some discretion built into it.
Which brings us to the elephant in the room, bias. If the whole problem is a crash of trust, the fact-checkers themselves have to be seen as completely trustworthy, especially in politics.
That is the core challenge. The process itself has 3 stages where bias can creep in. First, the selection. What claims do you decide to check? Second, the execution. What sources do you consult? And third, the resolution, the final verdict you give it.
So a study looked at a Spanish fact-checker, neutral, to see if they could find any political bias in their work. What did it find on those last 2 points, the execution and the verdict?
The results there were actually pretty reassuring. The study found no significant political bias in how they investigated a claim or in the final verdict they delivered.
So once they decide to check something, the process is neutral. It doesn't matter if the politician is from the left or the right.
That's what the data suggests,
Yeah.
which is good, but, and this is a huge but, the study found a clear and persistent selection bias in that first stage.
Who they chose to check in the first place.
Exactly. Neutral paid way more attention to politicians from the conservative Partido Popular.
So they were just fact-checking them more often, whether the claims turned out to be true or false?
Way more often. Especially the former party leader, Pablo Casado. He accounted for almost half of all the debunkings of political leaders in the entire sample. The bias wasn't in the judgment of truth, but in whose truth they chose to judge.
And that is so damaging, because even if you're technically neutral in your verdicts, the perception that you are targeting one side, that just feeds the narrative that fact-checkers are just another player in the game, another biased regulator.
It creates a crisis of confidence in the referees. And it makes you ask, what standard of truth are we even fighting for here? People want a gold standard, something fixed and stable.
Well, yeah. If the foundation of truth is just digital quicksand, maybe we do need a fixed anchor, a return to some kind of gold standard for information.
Let me just let out a very tired sigh here.
Yeah.
The idea of going back to some stable, fixed gold standard of truth. A world where facts are just facts and everyone agrees on them. That is about as likely as your uncle finally admitting on Facebook that he was wrong about those shape-shifting alien reptiles.
Ouch. So the gold standard is not coming back.
The gold standard is gone. All we have is this messy, human, underfunded, and often compromised process of fact-checking, which is itself constantly fighting for its own credibility.
And the whole ecosystem is vulnerable. These are often small, precarious teams fighting against a tidal wave of content.
And the big platforms aren't helping. One of the biggest risks the sources point to is conglomerates like Meta actively cutting their content moderation verification programs.
They're defunding their regulators.
They're defunding the regulators to save a few bucks right before major elections.
Yeah.
Which is an incredible act of corporate responsibility.
But the single biggest wall that everyone keeps running into, the fundamental flaw in trying to fix this bubble, is the black box problem, isn't it?
It's the black box. External researchers simply cannot fully audit the YouTube recommender system. The company doesn't disclose the full algorithm. They don't disclose the user watch choices. We can't see inside the machine.
So all this research, the random walk analysis, the browser plugins, it's all just educated guesswork from the outside.
It's sophisticated guesswork, and it can prove that these harmful pathways exist. But it can't prove why the algorithm chose that specific pathway for that specific user at that specific time.
The researchers themselves admit it. They say accurately assessing something like a filter bubble effect is almost impossible without more access.
The only way to get real objective research that leads to real solutions is for these platforms to open up their systems to external auditors.
Which would probably cut into the profit margin that's built on that sweet, sweet toxic engagement.
The algorithms are the toxic assets, and the banks refuse to open their books.
And that rather cynical note brings us to our conclusion. What do we do now?
So we've reached the outro, skipping the bubble. We've defined the inflation. We've looked at the machine. We've seen the intentional attacks, and we've analyzed the flawed defense. What's left for us?
Well, the core takeaway for me is that it's not just about bad guys creating lies. The fundamental problem is the architecture itself. The algorithms make this stuff profitable and easy to find. The lie is just exploiting a system that was built for it.
Right. So how do we deflate the bubble? The sources point to solutions on 3 different levels: structural, behavioral, and educational.
Let's start with the big one. Structural. Regulation.
This is where everyone looks to the EU and things like the Digital Services Act. The sources agree that the regulation has to be supranational because this problem doesn't respect borders. But, and this is the hard part, it has to combat the mechanisms of disinformation without killing freedom of expression.
A very fine line to walk.
An incredibly fine line.
Okay, what about the individual level? For the person sitting there with the aggressive waiter breathing down their neck.
That comes down to what the sources call epistemic vigilance and digital literacy.
Epistemic vigilance, that sounds intense.
It just means taking responsibility for your own information diet, being cautious, and the single most practical piece of advice they offer, the smallest act of resistance.
What is it?
Deactivate autoplay.
That's it, that one little checkbox.
That's it. It breaks the passive flow. It forces you to be intentional about what you watch next. It makes you tell the waiter what you want instead of just letting him bring you the spicy conspiracy theory.
Okay, I like that. What about for policymakers? Beyond just fact-checking, how can they steer people back to reality?
They should be using something called inoculation theory.
Like a vaccine for fake news.
Exactly. It's sometimes called pre-bunking. The idea is you increase a person's psychological resistance by showing them the manipulation tactics and logical fallacies before they're exposed to the lie.
So you're giving them the mental antibodies. You're teaching them to spot the grift before the grifter even shows up.
Yes, and studies show it works. Even a short inoculation video can make people significantly less likely to believe or share extremist content. It empowers the user instead of just trying to censor the content.
And the final solution, the one the source called the most difficult part of the equation.
Education. It's the long game. Digital literacy, civic education, it has to be built into the school system from an early age. The citizen is the first and last line of defense, but they have to be properly equipped.
We've covered a lot. The engine that amplifies lies, the people who weaponize them, and the compromised attempts to fight back. It leaves you with this feeling that we're just drowning in noise.
One of the experts quoted in the sources referenced Fahrenheit 451, saying we risk becoming a society full of information but without critical thought. We have access to everything and understand almost nothing.
So my last question is this. If the market for truth is constantly inflating falsehoods, if we're all living on informational speculation, how can we, the consumers, tell the difference between a real investment in knowledge and a worthless junk bond?
The only way out of a bubble is to stop funding it. And to do that, you first have to acknowledge the intentionality behind it all, both the strategic kind and the algorithmic kind. You have to understand how the game is rigged, who's pushing what, and why that waiter is being so damn aggressive. That's the first step to finally refusing to play.
A sobering thought to end our deep dive. Thank you for walking us through the architecture of our own confusion today.
It's a pleasure, as always.
And thank you for listening.